Welcome to the Phase Knowledge Podcast. My name is Terrell Humphrey, and I produce over 893 podcast episodes. And today, we're going to be talking about why making history starts today. And one thing that I've learned over the last couple of days is that history gets made every single day, but you have to identify the history that you are making. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about the podcast production business, the growth that I've been learning and I've grown into, nonetheless, and speak about the steps that you can start applying for yourself as well. So if you're new to the channel, get your notebook, get your pen. Today, we're going to talk about why making history starts today. First thing first, I talk about this whenever I do a podcast episode, and I have similar topics around this, but this one is so critical, so important. I just got to find it now. Okay, there we go. So important. And it is to create a plan. Not just any plan, a business plan. So with this topic, where this topic came about is let me come back to the screen. Let me bring this down so I can be able to find it. Let me make sure. Nope, still not it. She never touched it. Hold on. Okay. I think it's this one. Okay, there we go. She never touched it. Anywho, hold on. What this topic came about was that this past weekend, my wife and I visited Little Rock, Arkansas. It was for circumstances that wasn't good. You know what I mean? We went to a funeral and what. And when we went there, I started paying attention to things that I never paid attention to. And when I started to pay attention to the things that I never paid attention to, my understanding around business became like the focus of everything that I was doing. And not only just the focus around everything that I'm doing. When we went to a restaurant, I'm looking at how their customer service is. When we went to a restaurant, I went to look at how their menu is, not to judge, but to get ideas on how to have a better business or how to be better in business with my podcast production. And when I started to really learn and understand what's not being said, and I ask questions to the people who are inside of the organization, I'm literally learning how to become a better business owner. I'm literally learning how to make history. I'm literally learning how to create the steps that are repeatable. In business, when you have a plan, you have to understand that it's going to be revised every so often. And when you revisit the business plan, you are revisiting a new perspective. When you have a new perspective, the perspective that you have is not the same as when you started the business or when you started having a business plan. Let me bring that down. All right. Your perspective changes. And what that means is that you get more educated, you learn more, and you understand everything that you're doing. As I start to understand the business that I'm in, I'm like, I got questions now. I need to go ask these questions. When I have the questions and people are able to answer them because they are working in their company every single day, I start to learn it's possible. It's possible because other people are doing it. It's possible because there's a plan in place. It's possible because all I have to do is just ask the right steps. Making history does not start unless you have a plan. Having a plan, there we go. Having a plan creates opportunities. Having a plan creates the steps. Having a plan helps you establish the path that you would like to go. When I started the podcast production business, in fact, I got more clear behind it this year, and it just made me understand, wait, you've been in business for quite some time. It's actually working. Yes, I might not be making revenue today, but what about within the next couple of days? What if I start making revenue based off the lessons that I've learned while being in business? Being in business You have to be willing to learn from any and everybody. I've learned how to learn from any and everybody, regardless of the business that people are in. If people have customers, I want to learn, how did you get this customer? How did you get these customers? If people have a business, I want to learn, how did you become more established? How did you become more organized? How did you become more systematized? When you have a business plan, you understand the plan that you are working is the business that you are establishing. To have a podcast production business, one, I have to do the podcast. I have to do podcasting. And when I started to like look at other people who has a similar business behind it, I'm like, there's no way. Some people do the business and they're not doing the business that they're doing. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be one of those people. I want to be one of those people. I want to be a company who talks about podcast production, who publishes podcasts, who edited podcasts, who really go bring behind the scene of the podcast, because it's more than just the podcast production. It's literally showing exactly what I'm doing to be more consistent, to grow and build a brand. To understand that a plan is always going to change is because your perspective always going to change. When I started back 2.5 years ago, really understanding business, really learning business, I started to learn it in this program called Action Zone. Action Zone is a program for veterans, veteran spouses, service members, and people who are transitioning out the military. They help you go from ideal concept to monetize your business. In the program, I started to do social media marketing. Like, I was a social media agency. That was my goal, was to be a social media agency. And in reality, when I got the feedback from people, I talked about this in a previous podcast. When I got the feedback from people was saying, man, I don't know what you do. You do all these different things. You do Facebook, you do LinkedIn, you do YouTube, you do all these different things. But what is your business? How are you actually helping people? What do you do in order for you to really bring people in? That alone helped me understand that there's something that I was missing. The thing that I was missing was that it wasn't making sense. How can I do the podcast production business and not understand the business that I'm in? I started to understand, Marquis, what to do, bro. I started to understand that the growth that I've established all came from a plan. The plan has changed multiple different times. The plan has pivoted multiple different times. The plan is not the same as it was in the beginning. Making history starts today. When you make history, you are understanding, you are using what you have to get where you want to go. You can't get where you want to go if you don't use what you have. If you don't use what you have, you don't have a plan in place. You see, when I start to understand, like, ooh, okay, I'm getting more clear. I'm gaining more clarity. I'm in the Spartan Incubator. I'm in the Spartan Incubator at University of Temple with the Lowe Center. And as I'm in this program, I'm like gaining more clarity on how to have a business. When I understand how to have a business, I'm asking the right questions, I'm getting the right feedback, and I'm just like really soaking all the information in. But I'm not just letting the information go to waste. I apply the information. I learn how to apply so that way I can get more feedback. I'm understanding what I need to do, what I don't need to do. Since I started this program back in January, it's March now. I have so many different things in place, but it's not the things that I have in place that matters. It's the business that's around the things, systems that matters the most. The plan has changed. The plan has evolved. The plan has changed because my perspective has changed. When I start to get more educated, when I start to understand, I was like, ooh, this is what I've been looking for. This is what I've been looking for because it was something I was searching. It was something I was searching because I didn't even know the business plan, the business model canvas has to be updated. When I started to learn the language behind the business became more understandable. The service became more understandable. The product became more understandable. It's not the fact that the business plan is not established. Okay. It's more so that the business plan has to be established so you can change, so you can pivot, so you can change your perspective. Changing consists of you understanding that you have a plan in place, and when you have a plan in place, learn how to work with the plan instead of against it. The plan is going to always change because you are always evolving. When you evolve, you will learn. When you learn, you will grow. And when you grow, you will be able to understand the business that you're in. But see, before you get to that point, you have to be okay with figuring it out. I always tell my wife that she often be like, I know she probably tired because every time I figure something out, I go to her and be like, babe, I figured it out. And I go to her to express what I figured out, and I explain what I figured out, and I share what I figured out. Why? Because it's the plan. The business plan has to be figured out. You have to learn how to get your customers. You have to learn how to make revenue. You have to learn how to follow up. You have to learn how to put systems in place. You have to learn how to do all these different things. But guess what? As you're learning how to do that, your perspective is changing. As I learn how to do that, my perspective changed because now I'm becoming more, what is that word? Business acumen. Like my business acumen is developing. It's no longer, I'm just winging anything. No. Absolutely not. Winging everything leads to an inconsistent business. When you do and have a routine behind your business, it's no longer random. I'll give you a prime example. So last 2-3 weeks, I literally committed to going live every single day. And the reason why I committed to going live every single day is because the plan is to be consistent. Not only be consistent, but to really build the podcast production business. If I want to have a business, I have to demonstrate what I'm doing to grow the business. It's not the fact that it's overwhelming. It's not the fact that it's too much. It's not the fact that I don't know what I'm doing. I just have to give it time. So this past weekend, we go, my wife and I go to different places, and my family go to different places to eat and have fun and experience the moment. But I can't help to notice the small details that's inside of the business. The business works because people are coming in. The people who are coming in is because the business is established. The plan of the business has been updated, has been improved. Yet the way to get customers, the way to get attention, the way to get awareness has changed. It has changed, which means that the business owners, the businesses has to be willing to pivot as well. Not to say that all the businesses are not pivoting. Nonetheless, they have to understand there's a process behind growth. It's a process behind growth because you have to literally adapt to your plan. Your plan has to adapt to your current state, and your current state only gets evolved once you change your perspective. I remember going to this restaurant when I was staying in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was called Delicious Temptation. Shout out to the owners and Mike. And when I went there, it was a small facility. Oh, I'm not even using my board. Hold on. It was a small facility. Let's just say this is the square right here. This is the small facility. They had demand, and this right here is called customers. They had customers. And the thing that I noticed when I was going to the restaurant every now and then is that their customers kept increasing. They kept increasing. And one day, hold on, let me rewrite this. All right, there we go. Plus sign. It kept increasing. Their customers kept increasing. What does that mean? This place right here, which is small, let's just say small, can barely hold the customers that they are attracting. But what does happen, what I noticed this past weekend is that facility, small facility, now let's say has tripled its size. And what does this mean? Growth. It's not the fact that they are not growing. It's more so that they understood that they had to pivot. And when they understood they had to pivot, more customers came. Why? Because the customers didn't change. Customers didn't change. The owners change. And why is that important? In order for me being on the outside looking in, I'm literally looking at everything. They have a bigger facility, they have more staff, they have more things on the menu, they have all these different things. But what if they didn't have a plan in place so their plan can be pivoted to the amount of customers that they were receiving? It's not the fact that what they was doing is bad, because it was a great restaurant, phenomenal restaurant. But what I noticed was that small facility is no longer a small facility. They are able to serve more people. They are able to bring in more people. They're able to sit more people down. They're able to grow because the plan that they had in place was already working. It was already working. And I literally understood, like, oh, when you have the plan that's working, do more. Hold on. There we go. When you have the plan that's working, do more. My biggest challenge was that I was trying to figure out what I was doing, why I was doing this business, and how to go about doing it. I didn't even know it was called podcast production. I thought it was just called, like, I have a podcast business. I'm trying to grow a podcast business and all these different things. But in reality, when I got more clear behind it, I'm like, ooh, hold on. When people are already coming onto the podcast, I'm like, ooh, hold on. When people are literally sharing and commenting and following the podcast, I'm like, ooh, hold on. There's something here. But see, as I was figuring out what that thing was that was here, I was literally figuring out how to do more. Like, it made sense this past weekend. I was like, ooh, that's exactly what I need to do. Now that I know the podcast, the business I'm in, which is the podcast production, which we help multifamily investors build their brand through podcasting. Now that I know the business, now that I have the plan, all I have to do is just update the plan so that way my actions can be more. So that way my actions can increase. So that way my actions can represent the perspective that I have and start acquiring new customers and start reaching out to new customers and start marketing in a way where it helps me build my podcast production business. It's not the fact that people are not watching. People are literally watching due to the fact of me understanding that there's a system that has to be improved. There's a process that has to be documented. There are steps that has to be followed every single day. You see, business is not random. I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and how I said business is random. Business is strategically put together because now the owners are thinking from the customer experience. The customer experience just come in and they don't understand what business they're in because it's not their plan. The business owner has to think like the customer. In fact, when I start to think like the customer, I became a better business owner. When I start thinking like the customer, I start understanding what things what people like to see, what things would people not like to see. In addition to that, as I became a better business owner, I start to ask a lot more questions. Hold on. I start to ask questions because to make history, you have to understand the history that you are creating. It doesn't matter what you're doing, but it does matter how you do it. In business, it doesn't matter the business that you have, but it matters the type of business that you have. I mean, how you do your business. Because customers come first, customers fund the business, and when they fund the business, you can fund the staff. What I'm learning how to do, what I'm going to start doing. Nonetheless, as I start to understand, it's like, ooh, you're positioning yourself differently because your perspective is different. My perspective is different, which means I can do things and I can update the plan accordingly. Hold on. The plan has to be updated accordingly. That's the next point we want to talk about. The plan. Update your plan accordingly. Update your plan accordingly And we just talked about why create a we just talked about create a plan. In other words, create a business plan around with the thing that you want to do. And the next point we're going to talk about is update your plan accordingly. Update your business plan accordingly. Why do you need to do this? Okay, like I talked about earlier, your perspective changes. It only changes when you get more educated, when you have results, when you go back to your customers to get feedback, when you go back to the people that surround you to get feedback. You only pivot when you are when you are identifying what needs to be changed, improved, and just updated. There's a saying that I learned: don't do more, do better. But in order to do better, you have to do more so you can understand what better looks like. So what this consists of, when you do more, I just talked about this in the last point. Do more. Oh, wait. Right on the top one. Hold on. Okay. Business plan. Okay, when you do more, it's not saying to add things on, okay? Add. These are add-ons. Add-ons. What it's saying, when you do more, do more better. In other words, if this is the thing, hello, I'm bringing down just a little bit more. Do more better. Do better more. Oh, that makes sense. Do better more. Oh, I forgot to say this as well. Sending prayers to, because the word is good. How the word is going on, everything. Sending prayers to everybody as far as like with the war and all the different things that's happening now. It's crazy. So I'm sending prayers to all the service members who are active and who are going towards the war. So sending prayers towards that. So wanted to come back to it. Do more, do better more, which means when you have one thing that you're doing and you fine tune, which means improve the one, you can do more. This has to be the focus. That has to be the focus. This has to be the focus. Only this has to be the focus, because when one thing is the focus, you can do better. You can improve it. And when you improve it, you do more of that. It's not saying you have to do more things. I give you a prime example with my podcast. There we go. With my podcast, I'm going live every single day. But what I noticed is that live is not enough. Now that I understand the fundamentals behind everything I'm doing, I have to go live, start posting shorts, start really staying out there. What happens is that as I stay out there, I start to really grow my brand. My brand can only grow if I'm constantly doing the thing better. And as I do it better, just do more of what's already working. I had to learn what was working in order for me to do more of it. When I started to learn what more consisted of, I literally was like, okay, what does that look like? How can I do that? What do I need to do? What do I need to put in place? And I literally start understanding, like, if I'm going to have a podcast production business, I need to be doing a podcast every single day. At least one. So then when I start bringing guests on, and then when I start promoting, and then when I start marketing, well, what I'm doing is how we help multifamily investors build their brand through podcasting. It's not just a conversation that you're having. You are literally building your brand because now you become the authority. Now you become the authority because people are coming to you. People are coming to your platform. People are coming to your place. People are coming to your facility. People are coming to your home. It's kind of like you have a home gathering, or it's kind of like you have a gathering, and people come inside of your home. They see your home, they see the pictures, they see how it's decorated, they see your home. When you have the platform for people to come into, they see your process, they see your business, they see your impact. People are coming to you, and when people come to you, you are understanding that you are making a difference. History only gets made when you are able to do the thing that's working a lot better. As you do it a lot better, do more of what's already working. I heard this from the guy named Alex Hermosa. He was like, just do more. Just do better. Well, he was like, do more of what's already working. And when he said that, it didn't make sense. But now that I understand the business I'm in, to do more, you have to understand what you're doing. But then when you understand what you're doing, just do it better. Improve the inefficient communication barriers. Like if you're not communicating with your customers, fix that. If your customers are leaving, fix that. I'm recognizing that when people cancel a podcast conversation, it's not the fact that they're canceling because they don't want to do it. They cancel it because they probably got busy. Time wasn't it what time it did work, but they had to schedule, they had to cancel and reschedule. What that did for me with the podcast production business, that yes, I'm able to get people on. Now my goal is to help multifamily investors build their brand through podcasting. Why? Because people can literally learn about your expertise. You can literally educate your audience around the thing that you're doing. The thing that you're doing is the business plan that you have. The business plan that you have is what you have established. Is what's working, what's not working, and how it can be improved. When I started to see that, when I started to notice that, when I started to implement that, my perspective changed. Like I talk about in the first point, is that you have to understand that your perspective is going to change. To have a business plan, your business plan has to come from an idea. That idea won't stay the same. However, when you have the idea, you can literally change the idea so many different times. The business plan is meant to be changed because it's not going to stay the same. Somebody said this stat alone a while ago, and it was like YouTube was a dating app, and it came out in 2004. First, it was supposed to be a dating app, and then over time, it became what it is today. And they had to pivot, but they had the plan in place for it to be pivoted. When you have the plan in place, it can literally be pivoted. It can literally change. It can literally update because your perspective is changing. As your perspective has changed, you start to understand what's working, what's not working, and do more is what's working and do less of what's not working. Last point that we're going to talk about. What's going on, Brandon? Last point we're going to talk about. What's going on, is don't change. This was my biggest problem. Don't change everything. Do not change everything. And I'm going to underline everything because everything was my biggest problem. When I changed everything for my podcast production business, I literally changed everything. And I was in this mentorship mentorship workshop for business, and he's got to explaining you can't even see this. He got to explain the 80. Hold on. Wrote it in the wrong place. He got to explaining the 80-20 rule. He say 80%. Hold on. What did he say? He said 20%. What did he say? Hold on. He said something in regards of 20% of your work gets 80% of the results or something like that. 20% comes from 80% of the work or something of that nature. Anywho, when he got to explaining it, I'm like, I would change the 80 rule. I would change what's working, and for the 20%, I would keep. And with that concept, it was so overwhelming because I literally was like, oh, I figured out. But I didn't figure out anything because I had to start all the way over because I'm literally starting from ground zero. And then what's working, I had to change because 80% of it was working, yet 20% was not working. And I changed the thing that was working. When I say for this point, don't change everything, you have to find what's not working and identify one thing to change, one thing to update. Instead of updating the whole entire business model, find one thing to update because this will save you time, energy, and a whole lot of effort. Lot of effort. Making history comes from you understanding that you can change one thing. You don't have to change everything, change one thing, and over time that one thing becomes the thing that matters the most. The thing that I changed is that I was doing the business inconsistently because one, I was trying to figure out what business I was in, but then it's like, okay, once I figured it out, I need to stop stopping. I need to stop making excuses to recognize that the business I'm doing is not the business I'm in. When in reality, it is the business. The plan has changed, the work has changed, yet the concept remains the same. When I start to document the process, when I start to document the steps, when I start to really operate as a business, everything changed for me. The podcast changed. It's no longer just a regular conversation. We're going to have a discovery call. We're going to have the podcast. You're going to get the podcast trailer. You'll get the actual podcast. And then I'm going to follow up with you months later so that way you know that your episode is doing something. Why? Because I want to operate as a business now. The thing that I changed with Failure Is Not a Podcast is that I was doing it as a hobby. And it wasn't necessarily bringing in more attention, more awareness, more customers. I was doing it as a hobby because I was unsure of what I was doing. As I got more clear, I was like, hold on. Just in fact, this past weekend, I said, oh, okay, that's what I need to do. I need to do more of what's working. I don't need to operate the podcast as a hobby anymore. It needs to become a business. So that way, as I'm operating at it as a business, I'm doing the work. I'm documenting the steps. I'm creating the processes. What does this do? This forces you to become a better business owner. This forces you to learn how to be a business person. What's that word? Business acumen. It builds your level of business that you have, that you're doing. You understand what you're doing when you have a plan in place. And when you have a plan in place, you have to be okay with pivoting. Everything that you do can be changed, but it has to start with the plan. It has to start with a business plan. It has to start with the idea. It has to start with the concept. It has to start with steps. Eventually, you would get to a point where it's working. And then when it's working, do more of what's already working. So just to recap, this video, name of the title was Making History. You have to make history in your business because the plan is going to change. However, if you have a plan, changing is inevitable. Changing it will happen. Changing you cannot run from. Okay. And the first point we talked about was that you have to create a plan. In other words, create a business plan. Next point that we talk about is that you have to update your plan accordingly. Everything you do, you have to update it because you are changing. Your perspective is changing. Your level of education is changing. Your level of understanding is changing. Update your business plan accordingly because your plan has to be a replication of your development. Lastly, is that when you're changing everything, don't change everything. Identify what's not working and document why it's not working and change that one thing. And over time, that one thing will improve your productivity. And when you do this, you'll be able to make history because you are able to focus on the thing that's working. So, lastly, let me know in the comments your biggest takeaway on why making history is so important and how you're going to start doing it for yourself today. Never be afraid to fail, because failure is knowledge, and you never know the lessons that you're going to learn. I appreciate y'all. Hit that follow, hit that subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the following video.